So what's happening right now in Iceland with the Constitution is it's in a bit of what you might consider a constitutional purgatory. It's kind of laying in this very low-laying drawer underneath a lot of other stuff in Parliament, and it's not really being thought of very much until now. So over the last few months, with help with the film and the encouragement from the international community, we're seeing actually what we set out to document being affected by the document. So it's quite moving for me to see this happening. So there's a political party in Iceland called the Pirate Party. Yeah, that's right, the Pirate Party. And they have 3 seats in Parliament, which is not very much, but they have the majority of support in the society. So when the elections happen again in Iceland in 2017, if this particular party gets more seats, they are going to put this as their first agenda to make sure that this gets a vote in Parliament. The other thing that's happening is that Parliament itself has elected a committee internally to look at some of the more hot topic issues in the Constitution that have been really contentious in the society, so to try to break it down and put it in a language that the Parliament might feel more comfortable with. So you can understand why that's also a bit problematic. So we're trying to see it come through fruition the way that it was originally intended. Yeah, so I want to hear what your thoughts are. I just wanted to give you that update. You have an opinion about this, and you being here to witness this, you're actually kind of feeding into the momentum to see this come back. So that's why I'm all big on giving you these stickers and trying to get you to talk about this on social media, because they see what you're putting out. They're watching this right now. Yes.
What were the grounds for declining the Constitution? Maybe there's a specific reason.
No, there's not been a specific reason put forward, as much as there's just been a collective kind of lack of enthusiasm within the Parliament for it. So it kept getting just kind of delayed, the vote itself, and then a new Parliament came in. So with that transition, this just became really kind of like a ghost issue in the background. You know, after a crisis, there's this really interesting window of time for change, where people are talking about change, and then it closes up, because I think it's just human nature to want to return to a state of normalcy, or safeness in the home. So I think that's what we experienced with this. I mean, there's criticism that they weren't involved in writing the draft, so why would they support it? A lot of the language is away from legalese, which is what most constitutions are written in. So by having it as an accessible language, they feel that it leaves it very vulnerable for trouble down the line. Yes.
Why was it written in English?
Why wasn't it written in English?
No, why was it? I thought it was in English.
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. So the reason that you see so much English in this is because they knew that they needed to get the support of the international community to kind of get the Icelanders involved in the draft. So they simultaneously had it in English and Icelandic. All their sessions were held in Icelandic, but you could see the translations in English. I suggest if you have time to Google search at some point Icelandic Constitution in English, because you can see their whole draft on there, and it's really quite interesting.
Why the film name is the Blue Valley School? I'm sorry, I only pay attention for half an hour because I think the people in the film, their speech is not as standard as yours. So.
Right, their English was kind of harder to follow. Yeah. And I had a real dilemma of making this film on when I should put subtitles under people and when it would be patronizing. So I went through quite a taxing time trying to figure out who was really hard for people to understand. But I completely understand what you're saying. And your question about the title, so yeah, Blueberry Soup, you didn't miss anything. I don't cover it in there just so you can ask. So I'm glad you're bringing it up. Blueberry soup is an Icelandic comfort food. And so I wanted something that was a bit away from like the doom and gloom of economic collapse. And you're going to feel terrible after this film. Because I was feeling like a lot of films coming out at the time were very much about making you think everything is just screwed. So I wanted something that was about the community. I wanted something that talked about us kind of all being in the soup together, and to make you answer that question. Yes.
I noticed kind of the gender ratio in the council is not, it's kind of like but in the documentary it's basically like the majority were female. Did you show that on purpose or those female actors and more articulated?
No, you were totally on. And So the question is, why were there so many women that I represented from the council? Was it an intentional choice? Absolutely. The reason I chose that was I wanted to follow a connection between what was happening in these sewing clubs over into the draft itself. I thought, that's so interesting. You could have coffee and cake with your friends, and that actual series of ideas and discussions could make it into the foundation of your country. So I was looking for those parallels. Yes?
What percentage of the Icelandic people actually voted for it?
Oh, good question. So they had a very, very low turnout. I believe it was about 49% to vote, and that's very low in Iceland. And I think it was like 68% voted in favor of it. I mean, I don't want to excuse that part, but one thing that I think that we need to know is that in the Icelandic media, this was not documented. I don't know how many of you heard that this even happened, but it was creepy. Most of the time, I was the only person there with a camera during this process. And even for me to try to find information on what was going on, I had to rely on Facebook to give me dates. So it added to the lack of participation in the actual voting because nobody really knew when a lot of these votes were happening or what they were voting for. Yeah.
Have any of the countries followed this template yet? And are they closer than others have?
Yes, that's a good question. So for one example, there was a couple that saw this that were from New Orleans, and now they're working towards rewriting the New Orleans charter using crowdsourcing. Another one is that I've actually heard this referenced in what might be the Scottish constitution. They're referencing what happened in Iceland. Catalonia, when they're talking about their independence movement, they're also talking about the structure of a constitution and they're referencing how Iceland had done it. There's an individual, his name's Lawrence Leslie. He's a professor at Harvard. He hired the engineer for the online pad to come in and help him with his presidential campaign in the States. He's running on the Democratic line. So you're seeing a lot of people find bits and pieces from this for their own missions. Kind of exciting, right? Yes?
It mentioned that they solicited comments from citizens on Facebook, Icelandic citizens, but of course you can't filter out citizenship on social media. Did they, I mean, how did they, did they need to filter out international comments? Did that?
That's a very reasonable question. Like, how do you deal with the garbage that comes along with opening this up to an anonymous series of comments? And one of the women in the film, Katya, the really spunky lawyer woman, she said what she felt through this process is if you give the public trust, they pay that back. So they were surprised that there actually weren't a lot of trolls and weird poop jokes and things like that. It actually was constructive and people tried to work together, and even if they didn't agree, it was still somewhat civilized. I can't say that that's always what would happen. This was kind of an experiment model of participatory democracy. And even now the council kind of steps back and says, here are things that they would have done differently.
And did they care about whether or not the people that were making suggestions were actually Icelandic?
No,
Right.
no. A lot of people that I noticed at least commenting were talking about other nations' constitutions. So you'd see people reference the South African constitution quite a lot in this, and they would take those suggestions in. Yes.
One reason you said the parliament didn't like the constitution they made was because it wasn't moral speak, so it was feedback not. So why did you find some words in order to lawyer speak?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, why didn't the council, if there was a problem in the parliament with the language being used, why didn't they just hire someone that knew how to write things in that kind of way? The reason was that they really wanted to keep it in an accessible language for the people. And once you change that, you're changing the intention. So they were scared to even do that. Like, if they were going to do that, they wanted to get the whole council back together to agree upon it once again. So it didn't disturb what the original meaning was. That's a good question. Yes?
Is there a possibility that the constitution that's been drafted will never actually see the light of day?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not, you probably think I'm a huge optimist now. I'm trying to tone it down a little. I would have told you a year ago, no. A year ago, I would have said to you, this is just a stunning example of civic engagement that we could all maybe take around, and that would be that. But now with this excitement in the society to look at this once again, I think that there's a huge possibility. So they're trying very hard right now to get the society to care about it once again. You know, it's kind of like just trying to turn over this car that just is trying and trying and trying. But we screened them in Iceland back in June of this year, and it was an amazing turnout of people, and you actually saw people tearing up about not voting on this. And I think it just brought about this sense of, oh, God, we didn't follow through on this. So I think to answer your question, let's see.
How do young people sort of, how they take all of this, and do they vote, and do they decide about it?
Yeah. So after seeing this film, how are young people reacting?
And I sort of, just at the time, what were young people doing? Were they getting involved in protests?
Yeah, they were getting involved in the protest. Again, a lot of people didn't know that this was even happening. For an example, I was screening this film in Duke University, and there was an Icelandic woman, like young, and she said, I didn't even know this happened. How scary is that? There's 300,000 people, and she didn't know that she was living there during that time. So you do see a lot of the younger population showing up for the protests and excited to throw eggs at the parliament and to show up and voice their concerns, but I think you saw a mix and you participated in the draft. Now with the second wave, those that are supporting the Pirate Party very much, the younger generation. Yes?
Is the constitutional group now disbanded, having done its job, or is it ongoing?
Yeah, the Constitutional Council, they were only working for 4 months and then they all went back into their lives. So they're all back in the jobs they had previous to this.
So they get paid, or like you volunteer for that? It's like 4 months.
Yeah, they all got paid. It ranged, but it averages out to about £2,100, I believe, a month per person. So for 4 months, they got paid that
So quite cool.
by the government. So the Parliament, that's the interesting thing to connect with what you were saying about why this didn't come through, is that this was blessed by the Parliament in the beginning. You know, the structure in general was set up by the government and paid by the people. So there is some interesting parts to that. This is also a criticism of the group itself. You know, you had to have a job where you could leave for 4 months and return to a job. So that changes the amount, that changes the type of person that can be in the council. You know, you couldn't have a sheep farmer leave his farm for 4 months from the West Fjords and live in the city center. So, yeah.
So if you like you be like want some Chinese study and got lessons to register to vote, like government would ask them to do that, pay them to do that, and they didn't really do anything to be wrong.
This was an unexpected outcome. It was, and that was part of the reason they ordered it as there would be a national referendum, so people would vote, and then they would have the parliament vote. Because there was this idea that there's no way the parliament would vote against the people. But it was almost even worse to not vote at all. So it's just very disrespectful of the entire process itself. But we could also look at it as this is a structure that maybe just isn't working. So trying to get it to work with a new platform just isn't quite lining itself. What they were doing was very new. A lot of people didn't understand what it was all about, and so they felt very scared of that.
Why was it not covered in the Iceland media?
There, 2 of the 3 largest newspapers in Iceland were owned by an ex-prime minister who was very vocal about being against this new draft. So they just kind of froze it. Again, because it was so new, a lot of people didn't know how to participate, and the media didn't know how to document it either. They felt confused on what they were supposed to say about it. Yes?
We've got an example in the UK in Scotland. Scotland had a constitutional convention which did involve politicians as well as civic groups and faith groups and so on. In retrospect, would it have been better to involve some people directly elected, but also have some politicians involved as well? Wouldn't it be more likely that you end up with something that would be implemented?
I think you're bringing up a really good point. I mean, I want to know what you guys think about this too. I come from a political family. My dad's a politician, so I don't think all politicians are inherently evil or going to ruin things. We've elected them, so there's some good people out there trying to do very good things for the people. I would be very interested to know that. I don't know in this example if there was the parliament involved in the drafting, if it would have ever came to the draft that it is. But I'd like to see that example played out. If I'm missing people raising their hands, pardon me, just scream. Yes.
You made quite a comment about moving this kind of model out of Iceland other countries. Full disclosure, I'm actually Icelandic as well. Iceland's an incredibly small place. To what extent do you think the way that this works because it's small? I mean, it's only slight, the whole country is only slightly bigger than Norway. So how transferable is this to somewhere that's got 330 people?
This is the most, this is the consistent question in each screen. This is the only consistent question. And I think it's extremely important that we talk about this together because I don't know, first off, how transferable it is to a region or to a nation right away. What I can imagine, or what I've heard offered at different locations, is people that are in smaller towns. Like, for example, we were talking about Duke, which is in a really small town in North Carolina. Their population is 300,000. So they were saying, okay, well, what if we imagine this here on the city level first? And if we could make that work, maybe that could serve as an example that we could kind of refine. And then that could be reproduced in larger scales. But I think that we need to see it happen safely in other ways first before it can just be a whole country. I don't know. How do you feel seeing this about your country?
Expats are in there for a very long time. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. What? Yes.
It talked a lot about sort of the people who are having that constitution going and talking to their friends and having them sort of given input. Did you yourself get to be in a position at any point? And do you feel like there's part of you in the constitution as well?
Oh, what an awesome question. So I didn't participate on the online portion. I tried to not push my opinion too much because I didn't want to imagine that I had any effect on it. I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe it's a journalist paranoia to try to not impede too much. But somewhere along the line of screening this film at universities, all of a sudden I thought, forget it. I care too much about this and I can't hide it. And so now that's what's driven these tours since then. And that's what got us to bring it back to Iceland in June. So now I guess I have a place in that. Or do you have a place in that? When you guys see this, I mean, was there anything that really shocked you about what they did? Was there anything that you thought could be tried out here? If there was a constitution online, would you participate? Yes.
So there's a small, I think this is fantastic, there's a small part of me that has a slight problem with this as well, in terms of, by definition, if you have a fixed codified constitution, it is going to probably become out of date at some point in the future. And without going down that line too much, you could possibly identify certain amendments of the US Constitution that may be unsuccessful now, as they were when they were created. So there's a part of me that says this is brilliant, like there's a social movement and getting people together to create a narrative about the country. But there's also a part of me that says, but I wouldn't necessarily want to see it result in a codified constitution. I want to see it in narrative structures that then shape society in different ways. So, mixed.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you either. I think that we can extract different parts of it to serve what we need to try out.
Chad, I'll go back to what our friend said earlier about involving the politicians, and I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking, well, why wouldn't they do it? Because that's what we always do. But then I thought, actually, well, the strength of this experiment, which is still ongoing, right? We don't have an outcome done yet, is that they rejected politicians at that particular stage. Because politicians do what politicians do, which is if they were involved, they simply, tried to persuade these other people that they didn't understand politics, that they should listen to professionals, and therefore they should be subsumed, because that's what we do politically. And I think it just seems to be the strength of this, actually, that they resisted that. I mean, where do we go? I'm not sure, but it does seem to be that that's the real strength. There are probably thousands of initiatives like this that have been subsumed and assimilated by politicians.
Yeah, and I think we hit a core. Some people that even watch this film have a problem with me not speaking to authoritative figures. They feel very kind of thrown off and mistrusting of the information because I didn't interview politicians in it. But I was trying to kind of follow, for that exact reason, that same theme.
But just
Yes.
one other thing, just in terms of your selection, just getting into your role, the selection, Because obviously I'm sure we were all looking at the list thinking, well, okay, how representative is this? And you start seeing the professors and the lawyers, you know, this and this, so I can kind of experience some very exciting. And then you start to see the farmers coming in and trading. But they didn't come, their voice wasn't heard. So did they put on your part, or did they just choose not to be a part of the film, or there's some other reason why you don't hear from these?
Yeah, there was a mix. So the people that I chose, I was trying to get diversity at the beginning with occupations, and then what I ended up doing was getting what I thought was diversity in personality and diversity in their reasons for being there. I probably interviewed twice as many, but there was a lot of kind of, I don't know, people that are boring, and people that stutter, or people that just will like look off like they were bored to even talk about the process. So film-wise, I had to kind of chop those people out. In reflection, I'm not sure. I think because that question gets brought up, I probably would have focused more on the occupations, just so that we could have those voices and feel that was represented. But it wasn't intentional to only have lawyers and professors. Yes.
I know that's a question. So everyone had a number. All of the delegates, they all had this number at their desk, and then they were numbered. I don't know if it was just purely practical reasons, but when he said that maybe politicians would take over the process, if everyone's got this number, it just reduces everyone to a block, a building block of the whole. And I wondered if that might have, I don't know, been intentional, given everyone's number. That's your number 27.
I've never heard that comment before. I have no idea. No idea. And do you know were they the numbers that coincided with the order in which they were elected?
I didn't notice it.
Okay.
I didn't notice, but certainly the lady in the red, in the red chair, who's always wearing something.
Yes.
But she had like number 17 or something on a yellow piece of laminated card at her desk, and I wondered if that was significant.
It's only significant in that that's the order in which they were elected. Like the person that's way down at the very bottom.
Oh, so there's a hierarchy in the numbers.
In the popularity and how they were elected, yes.
And what about how did the chair elected? Was that the person that was elected first? Did they all decide on that?
Well, they were very, it was very difficult to elect a chair because of the whole template. They were trying to not have a hierarchy, I can't say the word, structure. What they wanted was to have everybody on the same level so they could discuss and then come to consensus. So the Parliament, though, put that obligation on them to find somebody that would be the chair. And this woman actually had a very tough time in the end because she felt like it didn't give her the independent state to be able to voice why she came there in the first place, because she had to act as this kind of moderator for the group. So yeah, the group was not interested in having a chair, but they elected her in the beginning.
What in the process people feel like they decided to run for the position, run for that position in council? Like, I mean, so should we could also run for that position, or was there any position run for that position, or just no one run? Oh, someone around the position, but no one voted for them. Or I don't know. Because like it's not. Because that process is people run for that position and then get elected, right? So just don't really understand why kind of we question why they didn't cover this position.
I guess
I think it's like both ways.
I'm not totally sure that I'm understanding. Can you try to say it differently?
I'm saying because that the election process of the member of the assembly or the council is people run for the position, right? So I'm just wondering, was there any position run for that position?
To run for the head of the council?
Yeah, or member of the council.
Oh, well, it wasn't vicious competition. It wasn't like the electoral systems that we see now. If people aren't like there's no slander, there was no people trying to say that person will rob you blind. There was just so many people running. The biggest issue was to get everybody to have the fair ability to talk about why they were running. Yeah. So they would try to use Facebook in a productive way. I know that's new for a lot of us to think about Facebook in a productive way. And don't think that this is a film to just be pro-Facebook. It was because people were already familiar with that platform. That's why they were using that.
I think that's all we have time for. So thank you all for coming.
And don't forget